Hi guys, it's Mrs. Galvin. I am here to do another read aloud of The One and Only Ivan. Yesterday I posted a video, and after I did some reading, I asked you guys to answer a question about what you think Ivan was trying to draw. And I got a lot of really awesome answers. And if you had guessed that he's trying to draw a picture of a zoo and Ruby in that zoo, I think you're right. Yesterday we kind of figured out that he's finished with these drawings, but he was telling Bob that something was missing from the drawings and he couldn't quite figure out what it was. So hopefully we can get a better idea during this read aloud what he's missing, so that way we can finally see this picture come together and see what it is. But I definitely agree that it is some type of picture of a zoo, and I think that he's trying to put Ruby there. And maybe by showing, if he does finish it, maybe by showing off this painting, it just might get Ruby to where she needs to be, because they definitely want to go to the zoo. Looks like they might be treated a little bit more fairly if they were there. So we're gonna start. Like always, there's a picture. I'll definitely show you a picture. Okay, this chapter is called 12. I lie in my cage with Bob on my stomach. We are watching Julia do her homework. She doesn't seem to be enjoying it. I can tell because she is sighing more than usual. Again, for the 100th time, or maybe the 1000th, I wonder what is missing from my painting. And for the 100th time, or maybe the 1000th, I don't have an answer. Dad, Julia says, as George passed by with the mop, can I ask you a question? May I, George corrects her. Ask away. Julia glances down at a piece of paper. What's the difference between the word spelled principal, P-R-I-N-C-I-P-A-L, and the one spelled principle, P-R-I-N-C-I-P-L-E? Well, the first one is the head of a school, like Miss Garcia, and the second one is the belief that helps you know what's right or wrong. For example, it's against my principles to do my daughter's homework for her. Julia groans. If I'm going to be an artist when I grow up, why do I need to know how to spell? And with a laugh, George heads off. Poor Julia, I think. Gorillas get by just fine without learning how to spell. All those endless letters, those sticks and circles and zigzags filling up books and magazines and billboards and candy wrappers. Words. Humans love their words. I leap up and Bob goes flying straight into my pool. A word. You know how I feel about wet feet, Bob yells, and he scrambles out of the water, shaking each foot in dismay. I look out my window at the billboard, and I can still hear Mac's voice in my head. Come to the Exit 8 Big Top Mall and Video Arcade, home of the one and only Ivan, the mighty silverback. I count to 12, and then I count again, just to be sure. I lay out 16 pieces of poster board, 4 down, 4 across, a perfect square. What are you up to, Bob demands. I'm guessing it doesn't involve sleep? It has to do with the billboard. That sign's a monstrosity, particularly since I'm not featured. I grab my bucket of red paint. You're not on the billboard because you're not in the show, I point out. Technically, I don't live here, Bob says with a sniff. I am homeless by choice. I know, I'm just saying. I study the billboard and then I make 2 flat lines like broom handles and another fat line that connects them. I stand back. What do you think? So this is what he made. Hopefully you recognize that letter. What is it? No, wait, let me guess. A ladder? Not a ladder, I say. A letter. At least I think that's what they're called. I have to make 3 more. Bob cuddles up next to Not Tag. Why, he asks. Because then I'll have a word, a very important word. I dip my fingers into the paint. What word? Bob asks. Home. Bob closes his eyes. That's not so important, he says quietly. All day long, I knuckle walk circles around my cage. I'm so nervous I can't nap. I can't even eat. Well, not very much anyway. I'm ready to show Julia what I've made. It has to be Julia. She's an artist, and surely she'll truly look at my painting. She won't notice the smudges and the tears, and she won't care if the pieces don't quite fit together. She'll see past all that. Surely Julia will see what I've imagined. I watch Ruby trudge sullenly through the 4 o'clock show and I wonder, what will happen if I fail? What if I can't make Julia understand? But of course I know the answer. Nothing. Nothing will happen. Ruby will remain the main attraction at the Exit 8 Big Top Mall and Video Arcade, conveniently located off I-95, with shows at 2, 4, and 7, 365 days a year, year after year after year after year. It's time to show my work. The mall is silent except for Thelma the macaw, who is practicing a new phrase. Uh-oh. Julia is finishing her homework. George is sweeping outside, and Mac has gone home for the night. I grab Knot Tag and carefully pull out the folded papers. So many paintings, page after page and piece after piece of my giant puzzle. I pound on the glass, then Julia glances over. Fingers trembling, I hold up one of my paintings. It's brown and green, a corner piece. Julia smiles. I display another, and then another, and another, and another, each one a tiny part of the whole. Julia looks confused, but what is it, she asks. She shrugs. It doesn't matter. It's pretty just as it is. Uh-oh, says Selma. No, it does matter. George calls out to Julia. He's done for the night. Grab your backpack, he says, and hurry, it's late. I've got to go, Ivan, Julia says. Julia doesn't understand. I have to find the right pieces. I dig through the pile. They're here somewhere. I know they are. I find one, another one, and another, and I try to hold 4 of them up against the glass. Bob, I say, help me, hurry. Bob grabs paintings with his teeth and drags them to me, and one by one I shove pictures through the window crack. They crumble and tear. There are too many pieces. My puzzle is too big. Careful, Ivan, Julia says. Those might be worth millions someday. You never know. She arranges the paintings into a neat stack. I suppose Mac's going to want to sell these in the gift shop. She still doesn't understand. I shove out more through the hole and more and all of them, one after another. So Ivan's been painting, has he, George says as he puts on his coat. A lot, says Julia with a laugh. A whole lot. You're not taking all those home with you, are you, George asks. I mean, no offense to Ivan, but they're just blobs. Julia thumbs through the towering stack of paintings. They might not be blobs to Ivan. Let's leave those by the office, George suggests. Mac will want to try selling them. Although why anyone would pay $40 for a finger painting a 2-year-old could do, I don't know. I like Ivan's work, Julia says. He puts his feelings into them. He puts his hair into them, George says. Julia waves goodbye. Good night, Ivan. Good night, Bob. I press my nose against the glass and watch her walk away. All my work and all my planning is wasted. I look at Ruby, sleeping soundly, and suddenly I know that she'll never leave the Big Top Mall. She'll be here forever, just like Stella. I can't let Ruby be another one and only. Often when visitors come to see me, they beat their hands against their puny chests, pretending to be me. They pound away soundless as the wet wings of a new butterfly. The chest beating of a mad gorilla is not something you ever want to hear, not even if you're wearing earplugs, not even if you're 3 miles away wearing earplugs. A real chest beating sounds the whole jungle running, as if the sky has broken open, as if men with guns are near. This chapter is called Angry. Thump. My sound echoes through the mall. George and Julia spin around. Julia drops her backpack. George drops his keys, and the pile of pictures goes flying. Thump, thump, thump. I bounce off the walls. I screech and I bellow and I beat my chest. Bob hides under Knot Tag, his paws over his ears. I'm angry at last. I have someone to protect. After a long while, I grow quiet and I sit. It's hard work being angry. Julia looks at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. I'm panting. I'm a little out of shape. What the heck was that? George demands. Something's really wrong, Julia says. I've never seen Ivan act this way. He seems to be calming down. Thank goodness, George says. Julia shakes her head. He's still upset, Dad. Look at his eyes. My pictures are scattered all over the floor like huge autumn leaves. What a mess, George says, sighing. Wish I hadn't bothered sweeping tonight. Do you think Ivan's okay? Julia asks. It's probably just a temper tantrum, George says. He reaches under a chair to retrieve a brown and red picture. Can't say I blame the guy, stuck in that tiny cage all these years. Julia starts to answer, but then she freezes, and she cocks her head. She stares at her feet where my pictures lie in disarray. Dad, she whispers, come see this. I'm sure he's another Rembrandt, George says. Let's pick these up and get going, Jules. I'm exhausted. Dad, she says, seriously, look at this. George follows her gaze, and I see blobs, many, many blobs, along with the occasional swirl. Please, can we go home now? That's an H, Dad. Julia kneels down, straightening one picture, then another. That's an H, and here, she grabs more pictures. Put this one here, and I don't know, maybe that one? You have an E. George rubs his eyes, and I hold my breath. Julia's running now. She picks up one picture and sets down another. It's like a puzzle. This is something. It's a word. Maybe words and a picture of something. It's a giant picture. Jules, George says, this is crazy. But he's looking at the floor too, wandering from picture to picture and scratching his head. H, Julia says, an E and an O. Julia chews her lower lip. H-E-O. And that looks a lot like an I. H-E-O-I. George writes in the air with his finger. I-E-O-H? Not the letter, an actual I. And that's a foot or maybe a tree. And a trunk? I think it's a trunk. Julia runs to my window. Ivan, she whispered, what did you make? I stare back and I cross my arms. This is taking much longer than I thought it would. Humans, sometimes they make chimps look smart. This chapter is called Finally. Julie and George take the pictures to the ring where there's room to see them all. An hour passes as they try to assemble my puzzle. Ruby's awake now, and she and Bob and I watch. Ivan, Ruby says, is that a picture of me? Yes, I say proudly. Where am I supposed to be? That's a zoo, Ruby. See the walls and the grass and the people looking at you? Ruby squints. Who are all those other elephants? You haven't met them yet, I say. It's a very nice zoo, Ruby says with an approving nod. Bob nudges me with his cold nose. It is indeed. In the ring, Julia pumps her fist in the air. Yes, she cries. I told you, Dad. There it is. Home. H-O-M-E. George gazes at the letters, and he spins around to look at me. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Jules. You know, a once in a trillion kind of thing? Like that old saying about the chimp and the typewriter? Give him long enough and he'll write a novel? I make a grumbling noise, as if a chimp could write a letter, let alone a book. Then how do you explain the rest of it, Julia demands? The picture of Ruby in the zoo. How do you know it's a zoo, George asks. See the circle on the gate? That's a red giraffe in it. Are you sure that's a giraffe? I was thinking more along the lines of a deformed cat. It's the logo for the zoo. It's on all their signs. Explain that. George gives her a helpless smile. I can't begin to. I'm just saying there has to be a logical explanation. Look how big this is, Julia. Julia puts the last piece of Ruby's right ear into place. It's huge. It is definitely large, George agrees. Julia watches me and she chews on her thumbnail. I see the question in her eyes. She turns back to the paintings and stares at them, looking, truly looking. A slow smile dawns on Julia's face. Dad, she says, I have an idea, a big idea. Julia races around the edge of my painting and her arms spread wide. Billboard big. I'm not following you. I think this is meant to be on a billboard. That's what Ivan wants. George crosses his arm over his chest. What Ivan wants, he repeats slowly, and you know this because you two have been chatting? Because I'm an artist and he's an artist. Uh-huh, says George. Julia clasps her hands together. Come on, Dad, I'm begging you. George shakes his head. No, I'm not doing that. No billboard. No way. I'll get the ladder, Julia says. You get the glue. I know it's dark out, but the billboard's lit. Mac will fire me, Jules. Julia considers. But think of the publicity, Dad. Everybody would know about Ruby. You want me to put up a sign that shows Ruby in a zoo with the word home on it in giant letters? A sign, incidentally, that just happens to have been made by a gorilla? Exactly. And you want me to do it without Mac's permission? Exactly. No, George says. No way. Julia goes to the edge of the ring, careful not to step on any of the paintings, and she picks up Mac's claw stick and she walks back and hands it to her father. George runs a finger along the blade. She's just a baby, Dad. Don't you want to help her? But how would it help, Jules? Even if lots of people see Ivan's sign, it doesn't mean that anything's going to change. I'm not exactly sure yet, Julia shakes her head. Maybe people will see the sign and they'll know this isn't where Ruby belongs. Maybe they'll want to help, too. George sighs, and he looks at Ruby. She waves her trunk. It's a matter of principle, Dad. Dad, Julia says softly, what if Ruby ends up like Stella? George looks at me and at Ruby and at Julia, and he drops the claw stick. The ladder, he says quietly, is in the storage locker. Okay, so some very interesting things happening in the story, and it looks like If you answered that question yesterday and kind of made your prediction as to what you think that picture was, we were right. It's Ruby in the zoo. And the thing that was missing was the words home. He definitely wants to send a message that Ruby does not belong in the Big 8 or the Big 8 mall. She belongs in a zoo where she can be properly taken care of. And it also sounds like Julia has now convinced her dad to help Ruby. So I'm going to be doing another read aloud tomorrow. And hopefully we can see what happens, because it sounds like they're putting up this billboard and who knows what's going to happen after that. But I want you to take another prediction or another guess as to what you think is going to happen. So they're going to put up this billboard. What do you think it's going to do? Do you think it's going to draw more customers to the mall to see Ruby? Do you actually think it's going to help in some way and get Ruby to the zoo where Ivan thinks that she belongs? So what are you thinking? I will put this video and the link into the class portfolio, and then definitely send me a video or just write out what you think is going to happen. So once this billboard goes up, what is going to happen to Ruby? Is it going to be for good or maybe not so good? Okay, so definitely leave your answers there, and I will see you all tomorrow for the next read aloud. Bye guys, thanks.